Welcome everybody. Hello, and this is the 12th in our workshops to do with the book Try This. And today we'll be looking at Key 12, which is called Enact a Film Clip. I'm going to share my screen. Now, before I do, I just want to just kind of do a little introduction actually to this workshop, because it will be slightly different to the way that I normally do it. So the other keys, when I was thinking about this key and planning for this evening, or this morning a bit, I was looking at how the other keys actually fitted with Zoom. So you could use the keys over Zoom. This one is a little bit different. It doesn't quite work over Zoom in the same way. So normally I resist the temptation to tell and do as much as I can of showing. But this evening, I'm actually going to spend a little bit more time telling than I normally would. And then we'll do a little bit of kind of an exercise, really, at the end of it, just to kind of illustrate how the key works. Because the reason for this, not to make it a mystery, is that a big part of how this works is in the classroom, the students get together in groups and create a film clip together, and then the rest of the class watches the film clips in turn. So you'll have groups of 3 or 4 creating a film clip, and then the rest of the class watching, and then with the teacher's help they analyze what's going on in the film clip. That's not really possible over Zoom, and we tried it this morning, didn't we, Viv, or your last night, and it was okay, but it was lovely, the ideas that people came up, but they were telling as well. They couldn't really show their ideas because of the format's not right. So that's the explanation for why I'm going to do this the way I am. So I'm going to start sharing my screen. Hopefully this will work okay for everybody. Can everybody see the screen okay? Lovely. So enacting a film clip is similar to Key 11, which is watching a film clip, except in Key 11, it's the adult or the teacher, most likely, who is enacting, and then the students are interpreting what's going on in the fiction, in the film clip that's happening that the teacher's enacting. In Key 12, it's the other way around. It's the students who are creating these short film clips. So that's the difference between 11 and 12. It's still the same idea in as much as the clips are themselves points of inquiry. So the idea is that the clip itself will open up a line of inquiry, except instead of it being the adult who's creating the clip, it's the students themselves. And of course, in a classroom where you've got 30 students or however many, then you'll have 4 or 5 groups. So you'll have 4 or 5 clips of the same event interpreted in different ways, which can be exciting and interesting. We'll get to
Can I jump in, Tim?
Jump in.
A very obvious point, probably goes without saying, but I have had this problem in a classroom where I didn't explain it. They're not actually making film clips, are they?
No,
We're
they're not
talking about
actually
film
making
clips,
a
but
film clip. They are enacting as if it is a piece of film. Yes, thank you for clarifying that, because that's quite an easy confusion. So just to illustrate what Viv's just said, in this key, the children are enacting an event as if it were a piece of film. So it's not literally a piece of film. So examples include feature films, or it will only be a bit of a feature film, just a clip from a feature film. Documentaries, CCTV is a popular one that often can be quite interesting. and then found footage, desk cams, training videos, all kinds of things. You could just imagine yourselves how many different ways there are of creating a film clip. Now, the essential thing about this is, as with the one that we talked about last time, is that you can hold time. So in a film clip, you've got a piece of film that's happening, but you can pause it and you can rewind it and you can watch it again. And it's because it's a film clip, then the convention is built into, or the idea of doing that is built into the convention. So it allows the students to look intently and make meaning, which is what, as I explained earlier. And this is facilitated with the teacher through discussion. So, well, I'll illustrate this in a minute. I'll make it much easier. And it's suitable for the creative exploration of imagined context, or for deepening an area of real world curriculum study. So it can be used both in imaginary contexts, that fairy tales or stories that we're making up for ourselves, or actual real world and historical context. It can be used any of those different ways. So that's what the clip's about. Now, I just want to, before I go into actually the steps, because I'd like to go through those one at a time, is to point you at another document which is free, and it's on the Mantle of the Expert website, and it's called the Conventions of Dramatic Action. Now, the Conventions of Dramatic Action, not to tell you something that you already know, was a list of conventions that was created by Dorothy Heathcote in an essay called Signs and Portents. Now, in the essay itself, there's no explanation for how the conventions work. They're just a list of 33 conventions. And she kind of leaves the teacher to work out how to use them, which has been an enormously productive experiment over 30 years, but also quite frustrating, because you've got to, people got to mull over these things, and then some of them are not very straightforward. Anyway, a couple of years ago, actually during COVID, I had a bit of funding from the Paul Hamlin Foundation to write a guide to how I think the conventions work. So this document, which I say is free and available on the website, is a guide to Dorothy Heathcote's conventions. And the reason I'm saying that is because one of the conventions is using a film. It's about actually creating a piece of, or enacting as if it's a piece of film. And there are some rather lovely illustrations that that go with that convention, and I'm going to use those illustrations for the explanation of what I'm going to talk about in these steps. So here are the steps. As I say, we're just going to go through them one at a time. So the first thing is that you want to introduce the idea of an imagined film clip, and then to clarify the context. So when we're talking about context, we're talking about characters, location, events, time, events, tension, and focus. So the six elements that are in the hexagon. Is it a hexagon or a pentagon? Viv, help me out. It's a hexagon, isn't it? So that's what we mean by a context. So if you think to yourself, well, what do we mean by context? Well, it's what have you set up with the students to create the idea of a context. So in the illustration, or the example that I've written for the book, it's Henry VIII. So imagine a class who have been studying the Tudors for a while and the story of Henry VIII, and they're probably upper end juniors, lower end secondary, sort of, I'd imagine between the age of 10 and 13 or something like that. And they've been studying it for a while. So they're fully aware of the tension that Henry was feeling with his first wife, Catherine, who he desperately needed her to conceive of a son to inherit the crown. And Catherine doesn't, sadly. And as she gets older, he becomes more and more frustrated with her. And so imagine this is what the children have been studying, and the teacher wants to use this convention to explore their understanding of of the curriculum, of what's going on between Henry and Catherine. So imagine a scene in a film where Henry VIII is seeing his wife Catherine for the first time since the birth of their daughter Mary. So Catherine eventually she has a series of miscarriages, very sad, but eventually she does give birth to a daughter who survives. But it's a daughter, it's not a son. And yeah, exactly, baby. He's like, "Argh." And of course, everybody is, you know, realizes the implications of this. So Henry, as you know, has been hoping for a boy. Everything rests on it. Some say the whole future of his family and Catherine, sorry, of his whole future of his family. And Catherine is more than aware that she's running out of time. So she's growing older, and she's less and less likely to be able to conceive. So that's the context. And as you see, we've introduced the idea of it being framed as a film. That's the convention. Now, as we explained, films can be stopped and started, run backwards and forwards, but it's only going to be a clip. It's only going to be 5 to 10 seconds long, not very long. So the second step is to organize the students into small groups, which is not what we can do on, well, not easily do on Zoom. Asking them to talk about what the clip might look like, and inform them the clip is going to be short, lasting no more than 10 seconds. So this is the language. I wonder what the scene might look like. We don't have to go and, so why don't we go and see what happens? It'll be best to work in groups of 2 or 3, and once you've decided on what happens in the scene, we'll come round and take a look at each clip. It doesn't need to be long, 10 seconds should be enough. So ask the students to find a space in the room where they can work. So imagine maybe they were behind their desks. Now you push the desk to one side, or you go and work in the hall, or find enough space. And I like this period of time. I find it enormously enjoyable, just watching children going off and working in groups. They often start playing and laughing, and you get a bubbly, after a few minutes they start relaxing, and you get a bubbly sort of noise in the classroom. It can be, you know, quite not, I'm not going to say chaotic, because that gives you the idea that they're messing around. They're not messing around necessarily, but they're playing is what they're most likely going to be doing. And what I find is that I like to sort of just move in and out between the groups and just listen to what they're talking about, make sure that they've got, you know, the right idea, which is the step 4. Um, so, sorry, that isn't step 4. That's as they're working in the previous step. The next step. So if you imagine them all sort of in play mode, all sort of talking and discussing things, the next thing is to sort of just ask them to just stop what they're doing for a minute, and then ask them to start rehearsing how the film clip is going to look. So I find that you actually need to be sort of prescriptive at this point. You need to say, okay, so just stop your talking now in your conversations. Now start working out what this film clip is going to look like. It's only going to be a few seconds long, so start working on that. Decide who's who, and somebody might be seated and somebody might be standing. You start giving them examples, and you just give them a little bit more structure and guidance, and then you watch to see them start to move. And then what tends to happen is they stop talking, or they carry on talking, but they start enacting. So you start seeing them doing actual activity and actions, and you get a lot more movement. Yes, Ben.
I just wanted to reinforce what you're saying, really. I've had the privilege of following Tim around with a notebook and watching him teach quite often. And I don't know about you, the rest of you, but I used to go straight here. When children would go off to work, I would say, right, now move off and start thinking about that imagined film clip. And I'd be quite directive and things straight away. I've even taught student teachers for years, and I said, now don't give them long, give them I think that is one way to do it, so that it insists on quality straight away. But what I've learned from Tim is that first phase of sort of bubbly play, I love the way you put that, where they might actually be talking about other things for a little bit, or they're kind of group forming. It's such an important part of it. And more than once, Tim, I know you don't want me saying this, more than once I go, oh, he's lost them. He's lost them, because it's not that they're chaotic, it's just that they're not exactly on task and they're not going for quality yet. But then I see Tim say, shall we start rehearsing this film clip then? And it's almost like that first bit was so important to then bring in, and you get higher quality as a result. And I think it's that first quadrant in the teacher's compass. Some of us have talked about that in other settings. So I just wanted to reinforce what you've said, Tim. It's nothing new. It's just I've seen the power of having that first bit where they go off, and the second, and really separating that request for quality to this point. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing that you might do, if you think that maybe some of the groups haven't quite got the idea, maybe this is the. I mean, once they've done this a couple of times, of course, it's just they know how to do it and they just do it. But the first time they do it, if they're not used to doing, pieces of drama and enacting things like this, it might be a good example. It might be good to just ask one group just to illustrate to the others. This is sort of what we're after. I mean, I'm sure this is all things that you do anyway, but it's worth kind of just talking about the logistics of this really, because when I first started doing this, I had the same sort of experience as Viv. Really, it was like I would sort of rush the sort of the creative stage, the discussion stage, the sort of the playful stage, because I would get a bit anxious that it wasn't, they weren't creating pieces of drama. They were more sort of talking and messing around is usually the expression, isn't it? But actually the messing around, if we want to call it that, is I've found subsequently is really essential to the quality of what they do next. And I think it's partly to do, as Viv says, with them feeling comfortable, both maybe in their groups with themselves, but also with the idea, what it is, what are we doing? How is this going to work? It takes a little time for ideas to kind of emerge. They don't just suddenly come to people. They need time to develop these ideas and to feel comfortable and safe. So, as I say, step 4 is the second quadrant in the Teach Compass, which is the dramatic action. So at that point, you're actually asking the students now to concentrate now on quality. So to decide on who's representing which characters, what are their actions, how's that going to work, the kind of mechanics of it, and to start doing it, to start moving into the enactive mode. So this is the language that I might use. Could I ask you now to start thinking about who's doing what in the clip? Some of you might be standing up, some might be sitting down, others moving through the space. You decide. So at that point, again, I'll do my little perambulation. I'll go around the room, talking to the groups, supporting those that might need a bit of help, talking to them about developing their ideas. Then, once we've kind of got that, I'll ask one of the groups if they don't mind showing their clip to the rest of the class. So I'm asking them permission. So away from the rest of the class, I'll go up to a group and I'll say, do you mind if we have a look at your clip? And 99
And
times
how do you
100,
select that? Do you, as it were, choose one that you think is highest quality? Do you choose one that you think is interesting?
yeah,
Have you diagnosed the social health
yeah,
of who you think is going to be happy to
yeah,
share? Or
yeah.
how do
It's
you
a great
choose?
question. So all of those things I think come into play, don't they? But sometimes I'll choose a group that aren't doing a aren't doing a very good job, who might be actually struggling a little bit. Maybe they're sort of still being a little bit playful and a bit daft. And then, but because I'll say to I'll say to them, well, look, everybody's going to be watching. So, and I'm kind of basically asking them to up their game. Sometimes it will be somebody or a group of people or an individual, if they're working on their own, who feels to me like they might be on the edge of the class. We all know children like that, aren't we? Who most of the other class ignore, or they don't pay too much attention to their ideas. To be honest, I don't think it's. Occasionally, it will be a group who look like they've really got it, but that's usually in the stage before, when I just pick up an example. If I think that needs, at this stage, I want to develop something with the class. So yeah, I'm not 100% sure. It would be always context specific.
But it
Now,
isn't simple performance, is it? It isn't like we're sharing back a thing, as in we're all going to we're all going to give it a good
no,
clap, and that
no,
it's actually another stage of meaning making. So you're looking for something that you can work with that's quite raw still, because you can take it to another place.
exactly. Yeah. It's in process. Thank you, Viv. Yeah, it's no, it's not a performance. It's not. We're not expecting anything close to performance level. It's much more It's much more experimental, and that's why sometimes I like choosing a group who really haven't got very far, because we're going to develop it together. So we'll gradually we'll build it together in the process of developing it. So imagine we're going to ask everybody to gather around. So here's an illustration. So one group are going to enact their clip, and then everybody else is going to gather around and watch. So you ask the group when they're ready to start, and as with a piece of film, the enactment can be stopped, rewound, and watched as many times as necessary, giving everyone watching the chance to discuss what's happening and reflect on what it might mean. So again, reinforcing what Viv's saying, I think it's think about it as a process. Don't think about it as performance. So imagine the group. So I'll just give an illustration. So imagine one of the children is representing Catherine, and she's holding the baby, like that. And there's another one who's representing Henry, and they're sort of standing like this, you see, like that. And you might sort of say, okay, so let's just before this film clip starts, I'm just wondering where this is happening. Has anybody, the people that are making the clip, have you given any thought to where this might be happening? So this looks like it's Catherine, and this looks like it's Henry. So where might this be happening? And the people who are making the clip, because maybe they haven't discussed it yet, they haven't thought about it. Well, it makes a difference, doesn't it? So I'm gonna invite you all. Where might, imagine this as a piece of film, so we can see where this is happening from the background. So where might this clip be happening? Here's Catherine holding the baby, and behind her is Henry standing like this. Where might it be happening?
You want us to answer?
Yeah, please.
It's in the royal nursery.
Right. Okay. So everybody happy to go with that? The royal nursery. So if it's the royal nursery, what sort of things might be around them? So imagine there's a film set. So there's props and costumes.
I think they've cleared away all the stuff, that's the woman's stuff. So there's no sign of anybody having given birth here. There's no blood, there's no rags, there's no she probably even gave birth somewhere else. So this is the room that the baby's going to be wet nursed and brought up in.
Okay.
So
just sorry, no, go on, carry on.
Yeah, so I was thinking hangings, there'll be hangings.
Yeah.
Tapestries.
So why is that? Why is Henry meeting? Remember, this is the first time that Henry
Yeah.
meets Mary. Mary's the baby.
Yeah.
Why have the why has the why is it why has Catherine been moved? So imagine next
I
door.
think I think I answered that question like that because I'm just so appalled by the idea of a baby coming into the world and being despised from birth. I'm just so appalled by it. Sorry, I'm answering quite from the heart, but and I feel like everything about this story is everything that isn't about birth and what it's actually like for a woman. So
Right.
that's why I think I just unconsciously I went, well, clear away all the real stuff, and and she's been transported into him, and I think that's honestly that's the answer to my question, to your question.
So what do other people think about that idea? If we follow that idea, so it's the nursery, but it's not the birthing room. That's through the door. So there's a
Mm.
door, and on the other side of the door, imagine there's a room where the birth happened, and that's where they're clearing up all the all the biological stuff. But
Mm.
why would they do that? So
I don't think the baby is really Catherine's anymore. It's part of the whole line and kingdom. So I see it as, I also see lots of people around because I don't think it's about mother and child and father.
Mm.
I think it's about this person, this baby who now belongs to this whole power structure. And being a girl doesn't really fit into it, the way they would hope. But I see attendants, the wet nurse, people around that are tending to everyone there. And it's not really about this bond between mother, father, and child.
okay, so let's just I'll just ask everybody who else might be there. So we've got the attendants, we've got the wet nurses, but as you say, the baby's not really. It's not really about a normal sort of mother-daughter parental thing. This is something else. So who else might be in that room?
Well, we know already that Henry is there.
Yeah.
So I'm imagining there's somebody of importance alongside him.
So I mean, we don't need to know their names or anything, but what sort of representation? So we've got important people. So who's likely to
Sort
be
of
represented?
political, like I don't know
Right.
what to call the roles because I didn't do
No,
this
no,
history,
that's fine.
but
That's fine. So,
chancellor or that
yeah,
Yeah,
it's the political person.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
yeah,
the chancellor's going to be there, Charlotte.
politicians and people
Yeah,
who have very enormous power putting pressure on them.
yeah,
So
yeah,
they really have to look. You're responsible for the people, and how, you've got to do this, that, and the other. And try and put pressure on them,
yeah, yeah.
controlling them.
Absolutely. So the politicians, the people who, as you say, are putting pressure.
Yeah,
I mean, the pressure that's built up over the previous decade on Catherine and on Henry, and these people are in the room. They're sort of standing in they're sort of in the background. I'm also seeing people representations of the church because
the bishops.
we know yes, the bishops, because we know what happens to the church. Well, perhaps you don't
Mm.
know the history, but what happens is the church is destroyed. The Catholic Church in England is destroyed by what's called the Reformation,
Yeah.
and they're aware of this. They're aware that Henry needs a son. He's absolutely desperate for a son, and
But
it's a girl. Yes, Charlotte.
well, sometimes it's a bit gruesome because I think they watched the whole process of the birth as well,
Well, I
which is like really
yeah.
terrifying, isn't it, for
Well,
someone?
yes. I think they had
I think they
representatives.
had to
Henry,
witness it and
right,
record it and everything.
right. The bishop, maybe there'd be a representative of the church would be there, but Henry himself
Yeah.
would not be there. He'd be in another room. He wouldn't be in
It's
the
a
room.
bit sort of shocking to children, isn't it? That sort of thing.
Sure. Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Very
not trying
shocking
to,
to
that-
us.
yeah,
It's a
not
big
trying to
impact.
protect them.
It's a big
trying to-
impact for children.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah. Well,
they go home and they say, "Do you know what we did, Mum?"
yes. Well, yeah. But this, for me, I mean, it's up to teachers to decide for themselves, obviously, how they want to explore these subjects. But you know, the history's in books, it's in films, it's in media. What this work does, and the reason that I got so interested and excited about it, was because it ends up being much more real. It you know, when once you start enacting it, once you start actually thinking about the implications of these things
Yeah.
and represent it in an enactive way, that brings history for me much more into the world of our imagination, and it is
Yeah,
much
and comparative
powerful.
with what's our world like now. Oh, we'd
Sure.
never do that now, sort of thing, you know.
No.
Yeah, it's that
Oh.
all important element of tension, isn't it? So when you're planning as a teacher, and what was a struggle, if you go back and watch the New Zealand clip this morning, the tricky part, because of the kind of film clip that was used, was to put some kind of human tension in there, something where we really cared. So what I love about your example here, Tim, is that, as usual, when I do your workshops, I no longer really care about the key, I only care about this baby. So there's a very
Right.
strong appeal to the heart. There's a very strong and really that's what the film clip is allowing us to do, because we can kind of watch it
Exactly.
so closely. But I think the trick for the teacher, isn't it, is to find that human aspect and the tension, the heart connection to that,
Right.
whatever the story is, past, present, future. Yeah.
Because if you teach the Reformation, it can be a very dry subject. I mean, interesting if you like history like I do, but not necessarily something that you can relate to, or not necessarily something that, as you say, you get concerned about and bothered about. You know, you hear about Henry wanting a son, and then he divorces Catherine and all of that. That's history. But here is the moment, the moment when a baby is born, which in all normal, happy family relationships would be a moment of joy. And it's as far away from joy as you can imagine, and it matters, and it affects everything. You know, so as you say, it's picking the moment. It's just choosing the moment in the story of Henry and Catherine, and saying that's the moment we're going to explore, and we're going to look at it.
I think that's the tricky part.
As we're going to look at it as a film clip. Now,
Elaine's nodding. That's the bit
yeah.
you do so easily, Tim, and we're going, how does he do that though? It's not the film clipness of it, it's knowing the moment. Teach us that.
Yeah. I don't know the answer to that. I think that's just, yeah. Ulysses.
Well, it's like you did just describe it to us well. I think you said you I'm sure you spend some time with this when you're thinking about it. You like, where is the moment, where is the humanity, where is the turning point? And I've seen this theorized, for what it's worth, as like it's the connection frame. I think it's what Bowell and Heap call the frame of connection. So you're looking for something that's going to let children into this. So you know, this is a baby being born, so this is something children can connect with, and they know what that symbolizes. So on some level there is a thing you're doing, and it's getting to the essence of the moment and finding something that's going to speak to children's hearts, or anyone's hearts.
Yes.
Right.
And what their own experiences are, you know. Well, we had, my baby brother was born this, that, and the other. So they'd be telling their own histories, weren't they?
Right.
But I think it's the two together that is challenging. It's you're finding those moments, the very pregnant moments, you know, the stories that are so full, but then it can't just be some, you know, something that isn't relevant. So to choose those moments, but then to have that be something that is important in terms of your curriculum, right? So this moment in history is important for so many reasons in terms of what happens afterwards, and what the implications are. So it's both that, you know, in our curriculum, because when I think, and I've been thinking about planning a lot, our next task, but you know, when I'm thinking about planning, it's usually the other way around. I'm not thinking about the stories or these moments that have tension. I'm thinking about what do I need, what do I want to teach in my curriculum, and those are very dry.
Yeah.
Those are very dry, you know, topics, and to find these stories, these moments that can open up these dry topics into something.
And I think that's where spending time with the hexagon helps. I did this with teachers the other day, and I think sometimes when we're natural drama teachers, Tim, like when we're naturally aligned to thinking this way, it can be quite a quick process. But for these teachers to actually get out that hexagon and go, okay, I'm teaching suffragettes, you know, I'm teaching women getting the vote. What is a moment, who is a character, what is a tension or a thing, an event that takes this right to the heart? And I have noticed, Tim, that often your moments will involve not, you know, not, it's not a trope, but often there will be a baby or an elderly frail person, or leaving someone behind who's injured, or there's often a humanistic appeal for concern, or a difficult ethical dilemma, or something like that, or an injured animal, or something that calls on our tenderness, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, because on the you know, on the continuum of engagement, concern is the thing. For people who are maybe not familiar with this, Dorothy Ethcott created this, what she called the continuum of engagement, which is about getting children's attention, holding that attention, building their interest. And then there's a line that kind of intersects the next bit, which is to become from extrinsic motivation to intrinsic motivation. And the word that she uses for the kind of the key that unlocks that is concern. So if what you're looking for is some element of the curriculum or the story that you're using as the context for the curriculum that the children can be concerned about, and the concern thing is the thing that develops the intrinsic motivation. That's the thing that, and then the next.
I have a bit of a conflict in my mind. I researched. They had to make a picture of Hiawatha's childhood, and the boys were from a lower socioeconomic system, and they were largely football players and motorbike riders. And their discussion, I had to record it and then transcribe it. And they're very varied backgrounds which children bring to a conversation. And they were trying to, there was sort of, I don't know, a sort of combative thing going on between the boys and the girls. It was terribly interesting. And they brought the background from their families into the classroom.
Sure.
And this is it's quite a difficult thing for teachers to do that. And how do they process that? How do they put that into a context of the task? This is a literacy task.
Well, if they're interested in motorbikes and football, then what I would say is that doesn't fit into the Hiawatha story, because Hiawatha, was it Hiawatha?
No, it doesn't.
No, so because it's a different time in history. So motorbikes and football are yet to be invented, but the themes are transport and entertainment or sport. So I would say to them, well, Hiawatha won't know anything about motorbikes, but she might well know about horses, and that's something that she cares very much for. And in her childhood, she may have had a horse, and that horse was something that she cared very greatly for, and she would look after. And she may have had other forms of entertainment and ways, and her sisters and brothers, you know, they may be fond memories that she has of playing games with them, you know, hide and seek, chase, and all the kinds of games that young children play. So I would say yes, but to that.
Yes, so the
that's a great
teacher,
idea, but we've got to fit
teacher's
it into this
contribution.
story. Yeah,
Yeah.
because
So it's a
they're
teacher's-
interested.
And I also noticed how the width of the task allows children to bring more or less of themselves in. So this task that Tim's taking us through, and sorry, Tim, I've hijacked you a
No,
bit. We
go
should
on,
get back
go
to it.
on.
But
Yeah.
it's only this wide. It's who's standing there with the birth of the baby in the arms and the king. We really can't bring too much. We will bring our whole selves, of course, into it, but we can't populate that with too much more detail, because it's quite constrained task.
Yes,
Whereas,
you need to
write
control,
someone's whole childhood, I'm not saying that was the task, but so the task will be bigger or smaller. And one of the things I've noticed, Tim, is that often our ability to expand is deep rather than wide with these keys.
Yeah, it's
It's
something
keeping
small.
focus.
It's something small. It's something. So in the whole of her childhood, it would be something that she can't forget. Something that's. I mean, we've all got that. Haven't we? We can all kind of take ourselves back to our childhood and remember a time when, and it will be that. It will be something small, not like the whole thing, but just something small, something that is of concern for her, that connects us to her. So with those boys, what we're obviously trying to do is to connect their lives, their interests, their concerns, the things that interest and excite them, to the story of Hiawatha. So it's the right strategy. 100%, I believe that's the right strategy. And it's like, but if it's tricky, if they're going on motorcycles and football, then it's finding those things in Hiawatha. And as I say, what I do is I tend to look at its themes. So I say motorbikes are transport, horses are transport in the time of Hiawatha. So that's the connection.
What was interesting was that the bug, which is it lights up its body, a firefly, and they had no idea what that was.
No.
So they gave him a name, and it was a name to the football player who's a striker, because he was a very important part of the whole discussion. And they all had to collaborate to make a picture of what was going on in the poem. And it was very interesting because they had to identify the role that the firefly had, and that's brought in the issues of importance for them out of their background, which they brought into the classroom.
Okay.
So it was difficult. It's difficult for a teacher to know how to manage that.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, well, these are the moments. This is why we're teachers. We're not actors on a stage where everything's practiced and rehearsed and there's a script. We're making things happen moment by moment, aren't we? So I just wanted to come back to this step and what we've done. So remember the group have stood up. One of them's representing Catherine with the baby, and the other one is Henry, and they haven't moved yet. The film clip hasn't actually started yet. What we've done is we've talked about the setting and we've talked about who else might be there. So we might say, and this goes back to the bit that Viv was talking about, why it's not performance, it's inquiry. We might say, I'll tell you what, who would be prepared to stand as the bishop? So one of the children who were watching, who weren't part of the film clip originally, their original idea, so somebody says, "I'll do it." So say, okay, so where would the bishop be standing? Now, what about the woman who helped Catherine deliver the baby? Where might she be? Who would like to represent them? So after 3 or 4 minutes, you, rather than just the two of them, you've now got half the class are now part of the film clip, who weren't even part of the original discussion, but now they're populating the film clip. And I've found that this works brilliantly. This is the sort of thing that really can create sort of really significant moments. And then we say, okay, so we're now going to see the clip. So I'm just going to remind myself what the, oh yeah, so there's the illustration of that. Now, so I'll just go back to this. So we're now going to see the clip, and imagine that what they've invented is that Henry's standing there like this behind the baby, and he leans over, and then he sort of looks at the baby, and then he turns around. That's it. That's the clip. It's only, what's that, 5 seconds long. Now, what you can do is you can say, well, let's just have pause that there. Did you see the look? Did you see that look that Henry gave the baby? Could we have a look at it again? And the person who was playing Henry, who might not really have done very much the first time, now everybody's looking at that. Everybody is, because that suddenly becomes the point of inquiry. Everybody's making meaning out of that. So whatever they did with their face, and they may of course change it a bit because we're in process. We're not trying to get them to repeat what they did. So they just kind of lean over and say, we'll just have another look at it again. So everybody make sure you can see. So get everybody out of their roles, and we're all around the front. We're now all staring at the person who's representing Henry, and we're looking at them, and they just go, and they do that. And you say, did you see that? Did you see what they did? Why do you suppose a father would do that? Why would a father do that? And that's the inquiry. They're right there. And then everybody's talking about it, and you're saying, and then you're unpacking the whole thing. Does that make sense? It's all the build up to it, but it's also the focus of it. Just looking at that moment, and it's all in that moment.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, please.
So at this point, would you have, oh, maybe you're gonna,
No, go ahead.
okay. You're not done.
No, just
wondering,
ask the question.
would you have all the groups go then and do their version, or do you take this one and you've unpacked it so much and you've actually involved other students in it, maybe half the class or whatever, that you don't need to have one after the other do the same thing?
Right. So I think this is a wonderful question, because I think when I first started, I thought my obligation was to do every group. That I felt that was an obligation that I had. But as I've worked more and more in this, I've sort of thought to myself, well, that's not necessarily the best thing. We don't necessarily have to see every group, but we may. Every group wants to have a go at creating their own film clip, because we spent, half an hour or 40 minutes setting up something, so they want to go ahead and do that. So I might just use, I don't know if you've done this yourself, Elaine. I think it works really, really well. As I say to people, go back to your groups now that we've had a look at this one, and just have a quick chat with each other and see if you want to change yours or modify it in light of what's happened there. And you might come up with an entirely different idea. And often, again, there's another kind of round of creativity and discussion and everything. And then I'll say, okay, everyone. So I'm looking at the time and I'm thinking, right, we haven't got time to have a look at every group, but everybody wants to do their group. So I'll say to everyone, okay, get into your starting positions. Everybody get ready. So imagine that the clip's paused. We're just about to push play. So everybody get in that position, whatever that position is. So they all do that. And then I'll say, I'm going to go 3, 2, 1, play. And every clip plays at the same time. So they're all doing their clips all at the same time. If there's enough time, and what I might do is just split the class in half and say, okay, everybody on this side, have a look at the clips on this side. And, I find that often I'm under pressure of time, and I'm sure you're the same. It would be, maybe the best thing would be to have a look at each group, but that might take the rest of the afternoon, and then you just don't have the time to do that. But I do want to honour what people are doing and to give them the opportunity to develop and create their own. Because in their groups, there's an awful lot of productivity going on, an awful lot of conversation and discussion and thought going on. It doesn't necessarily have to be shared with the rest of the class, but it's still very productive, I think. Is that sort of, yeah, okay. So I was just gonna look at this. Encourage the students who are sharing their imagined clip not to explain. Okay, so this is important. This is really important. And so if the children are in the clip, don't let the rest of the class talk to them directly. What I do is I say let the clip or the piece of art, whatever it is, let it speak for itself. So if Catherine's holding the baby and she's not looking at Henry and Henry's sort of leaning over her shoulder, that's what we've got. We can't talk to them and say, why are you doing that? Or what are you thinking? Or what are you going to say? We can't do that, because as soon as we do that, it doesn't become a film clip anymore. Now it just becomes the people in the film clip explaining what they're doing. So I tend to sort of say to them, right, you can't talk as the characters. Now, sometimes you do need to talk to the people who are creating the film clip, because there may be some ambiguity about who they are or where they are or something like that. So what I do is I say, come out of the film clip and just, if you could just explain to us, you know, we're not very clear about who you are. Oh, I'm the bishop. Oh, okay, fine, that's fine. So now we're clear, this is the bishop, right? Because we weren't clear who you were. You were sort of standing at the back there and we weren't clear. So are there any other questions? Not to explain, but just to say, give kind of factual details or details of things that aren't clear because they're not actually in costume or anything like that. John, how do you feel about that? Is that because I kind of feel that's important, yeah?
I do too. I think and I think just go slightly back a bit, the business of honouring everybody's contribution is really important. And sometimes, and if you're a classroom teacher, then you can go back to that and you can store things and you can see the clip or another clip. And sometimes what I would do with that is do a bit of on-the-spot analysis of the clips by encouraging class to say, oh, what I've seen while that was on is hate, or I've seen victim, or, you know, and to try and sort of just boil it down. And then I try to remember those or scribble them down so that if I have time, I can go back to all the productivity that they've given me.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. It's kind of the hardest thing, isn't it? When I was a classroom teacher, I had more time. I could revisit things and go back and sort of say, well, let's go back. Do you remember that thing that we were doing last Friday? Let's go back to that. And the kids would go, oh, yeah, okay, fine. And then we carry on. But as a visiting teacher, you obviously you don't have the opportunity to do that really. Okay.
But what I can do as a visiting teacher is give me notes to the classroom.
Yes, absolutely.
Or encourage the classroom teacher to scribe like the clappers as it's going along and take the points for her or for him.
Yeah. And I find it is in those times are incredibly productive. There's an awful lot going on. There's usually, as you say, a great deal of thought and conversation and things. So that's an illustration of that. So we're coming to the end now. Ask the students to go back in their groups and continue rehearsing. That's what we're doing. Repeat as often as necessary. So their answers, as I explained, that's not always possible to do all of them. So there was, yeah. I'm gonna stop at that point. Come back to our group. There we go. Nice to see you again. Um, so that is Key 12. That's how it works. I hope that was all right, because that was slightly different to the way that we normally do it. And obviously, normally I'd like you to be able to create your own film clip, but it's very difficult in our group here. But over Zoom. Were there any other questions that or any other things that people want to discuss before we finish?
Yeah, it reminded me a lot of building up a tableau, like first staging some parts and then making people get in and complementing the rest. But now you have the adding of the visual and moving part with more fluidity, so to make it a film-like experience.
Yeah, yeah, it is close to the tableau convention. I was trying to think this morning, Viv, wasn't I? The one on Jonathan's list. So I think Tableau is probably closest. I think it has more flexibility than Tableau. I think as you've said there. I think and the only example that we've looked at is a film that's been made. Whereas there's some great stuff that you can do with found footage or CCTV, things that didn't have an intention. So they're capturing an event that maybe the people who were caught on camera weren't even aware that it was being filmed. So there's a whole other different kind of genre there, which I don't think quite fits into the Tableau convention. I don't think it's the same kind of thing.
And we spent quite a bit of time talking about that in the New Zealand session. We spent a bit of time as teachers thinking about what, if you're planning to use this key, what choice do you make of kind of film that aligns with your topic that you're wanting to teach? So my one, sorry, I'll just quickly mention my one. I wanted to do something as different as I could from Tim's example, and so I chose an abstract concept of critical literacy, and the idea of critiquing the texts and things and images that we see online. That's really different. And if you just say we're going to make a film about that doesn't quite sit with that genre. So I ended up suggesting that we make TikToks or about critical literacy, and they were framed as the TikToks that had changed people's conceptions and really changed behavior. So I think part of the teacher's task, as well as choosing that moment of concern and tension, is to go, well, which film clip sings with the thing, that the content here. So in Tim's case, it's obviously in some kind of, well, one way of looking at it is it's a film that was made about this piece of history. Another, as we talked earlier, is that you could just say, let's watch this piece of history as if we were watching a film. But I think it's worth thinking about, there are loads of genres of film, and they each bring their own conventions.
Right.
So, with TikToks, we're also thinking about the zooming in and out. We're thinking about the sound that's on. We're thinking about the clips the words that are floating in front. Whereas with a film, like Tim's one, it's slow down, zoom in. So yeah, I think that's also another interesting part of this key that takes it beyond conventions as we tend to think of them.
Yeah, thank you. Charlotte, you had something.
Yeah, it's very interesting because I studied, real books, and the main thing is it's the dialogue inside somebody's head with the text, and this is very interesting because if you're reading a history book, there's always this dialogue of comparing what your experience is with what you think you're reading, and it's that sort of interaction that brings a sort of aha moment or an insight for a learner. And it might be very good for children to be able to feel allowed to do that and identify with characters and bring a sort of inner dialogue to text rather than being dead text. This is what you've got to do.
Right.
Anyway, it's just a thought.
Well, no, and then if you were doing something like that, you'd need another convention, which again, film can help, which is the voice of a narrator or even the character.
Yes.
And you sometimes have in films or TV programs where the character breaks the fourth wall. So you could even use a convention like that, which children are you know, they're media literate, aren't they?
They're so imaginative. Yeah.
And very imaginative about how
Mm.
these. So you could
reconstructing the whole thing all over again.
It would mean changing the film frame slightly from the one that we were talking about, because that was done as a feature film. It was done as a story being told as if the characters were real. But if you wanted to change it, you could change it to have the characters actually looking at the camera and speaking to the camera directly. As I say,
I think it's really fun to consider what your kind of film allows for.
Yeah.
So if it's CCTV, we're never going to hear people's inner thoughts, because that doesn't happen. I personally like going, wow, it's CCTV, so you know, but you can always break that and say, but what if we could? I suppose you can do that. Sure. But nothing's impossible. But it's quite nice to kind of, that's why I'm saying it's quite nice to think about what you know, a film clip is not one thing. If it's a highly produced piece of Hollywood, yeah, you could have a narrator coming over the top, you could have, you know, fade in sound here, you could have all of those things. Whereas if it's a piece of captured CCTV, you might not even have any sound. It might literally just be the actions, or it might be frames, you know, 3 seconds apart. So it's really fun to think about the limitations that the particular kind of film offers for you to work with.
Yeah, and I think that's important. That's really important. We've talked about it, haven't we, Viv, about sticking with the convention. So if you choose a convention, if it is CCTV, there are limits to that. It's not the same as if it was a highly produced kind of experimental TV program where the characters can break the fourth wall. It gives you it limits, but it also creates its own tension in terms of what can be done.
It creates a sort of fabrication of a story, doesn't it? Because the big question would maybe come into children's minds, well, who wrote the history? Is it really true? You know, all those philosophical questions children come up with.
Yeah.
It's a really challenging thing, isn't it?
And also, now that you're mentioning this idea of the different types of media film, also how they relate to your objective, it's very interesting, as they allow you to explore some intimate parts of the historical character, or just events. I mean, there is a large scope of what you can do depending on what sort of type of genre you're relying on.
Yeah. It's one of the ones that I last time we talked about enacting a film clip, which is the kind of teacher and role. I use that all the time, but I use this one all the time as well. And I think the reason that I use it a lot is because it's got that flexibility, and it allows you to, it's got a wide canvas, and this faculty to be able to stop, start and rewind is so useful for the work that we're involved in, engaged in.
And they both allow you to examine the implications from the moment.
That's right.
Afterwards. So in this film clip genre, you've got, you know, 2 years on, another moment.
Yes.
And there's a whole way of looking at history, timeline, moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
But that's what's exciting me about this evening. Thank you.
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, well, we must finish because we've overrun a little bit, and it's been great seeing you all. I hope you enjoyed talking about this, Key. I think it's one of the good ones.
Very stimulating. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. All right. So I'll say goodbye to you all. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks. Great to see everyone. Bye, Natalia. Bye, Elaine.
Bye-bye.
Bye, John.